Hello, my name is Chelsea McCracken, and I'm a researcher at Ithaka S+R. Today, I'm going to share with you the results of a 2024 survey of academic biomedical researchers about their use of generative AI. The agenda for today is to first review the background of the survey, the methodology, and the key findings, and then dive into the detailed findings about biomedical researchers' attitudes towards and adoption of generative AI and their support needs and some recommendations. The survey was conducted by Ithaka S+R, a not-for-profit organization that helps academic and cultural communities serve the public good and navigate economic, technological, and demographic change, with support from the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, CZI. I'd like to thank my colleagues and co-authors, Dylan Rudiger and Michaela Skinner, and my colleagues Melissa Blankstein and Sage Love for their work on the project. The research enterprise team at Ithaka S+R has a focus area on generative AI and has recently published or is currently working on a number of projects in this space, including large-scale surveys, qualitative studies, cohort projects, and product trackers. In the project I'm reporting on today, we conducted an international survey of around 2,500 academic researchers, 770 of whom identified as biomedical researchers. You'll see throughout that we often compare biomedical researchers to the overall sample across disciplines. The survey was conducted in early 2024, and the report was published in October. And you can find the full report on our website at the link on this slide. The survey was conducted through Qualtrics using a contact list purchased from a vendor. We asked respondents about whether and how they had used generative AI in their research. We found that overall, while 6 in 10 biomedical researchers had used generative AI in their research at some point, only 4 in 10 were doing so at the time of the survey, and fewer than 1 in 10 used it regularly. While biomedical researchers seem open to using generative AI in their research, their approach tends to be that they are experimenting with it. So far, they're not impressed with its accuracy and are uncertain about how to use it ethically and productively. Now we'll dig into our findings in more detail. First, we'll look at the attitudes that biomedical researchers expressed about generative AI. We asked respondents about their familiarity with generative AI. Biomedical and other respondents were more familiar with Gen AI in general than they were with its applications in research contexts. For example, 2/3 of respondents described themselves as extremely, very, or moderately familiar with Gen AI in general, but only 40% described themselves as extremely, very, or moderately familiar with Gen AI's research applications. Over 20% indicated that they had no familiarity at all with Gen AI. We also asked about respondents' degree of interest in using Gen AI in their own research. Researchers were curious about using Gen AI. 34% of biomed respondents were extremely or very interested in doing so, and only 13% had no interest. Discipline didn't make much difference in familiarity with Gen AI, but we do see some variation by discipline, with the arts and humanities showing notably less interest overall, and business showing more interest. Biomed is clustered in the middle with social sciences and physical sciences. Turning from attitudes towards the technology to actual use cases, the survey included several questions designed to get a more granular picture of how biomed researchers are using Gen AI, how often they're using it to perform specific tasks, and how satisfied they are with its performance. We asked researchers if they were currently using Gen AI in their research. As you can see, the disciplinary breakdown was very similar to the one we saw when we asked about interest in using it. Business faculty are the most likely to be using it, with humanities and the arts the least likely to be using it. One thing I want to draw attention to is that with the exception of business, where almost 1 in 5 use Gen AI regularly, In all other fields, regular users are few and far between. In biomed, only 7% of faculty are regularly using it for research. Biomed researchers are taking the ethical complexities of Gen AI seriously. The top 5 barriers to using Gen AI all had direct connections with ethical issues, some social or political, some legal, and others specific to research integrity. So the curiosity and open-mindedness I mentioned earlier towards Gen AI is tempered with significant concerns, most of which have no easy solution. We found that biomedical researchers are using generative AI for a wide range of purposes, ranging from discovery to experimentation and to preparing manuscripts for publication. However, the greatest current use of generative AI is somewhat concentrated at what might be considered to be the beginning and end points of a research project. So discovering and understanding relevant scholarly literature and editing manuscripts for publication. And of course, email, the bane of academics everywhere. In contrast, generative AI has made only modest inroads into the middle experimental phase of research. Only 7% of biomedical researchers had generated hypotheses using Gen AI, and fewer still had used it to design experiments, test hypotheses, or generate simulated or synthetic data. A somewhat larger number of biomedical researchers have used Gen AI to analyze data, but overall, few biomedical researchers are using Gen AI to conduct original research. It's important to reiterate that the number of biomedical researchers using Gen AI for any specific research purpose is dwarfed by the number of non-users, who comprise between 69% and 96% of respondents for each use case, with a median of 90%. In contrast, the percentage of respondents who regularly use AI for a given task ranges from 15% to 1% of biomedical researchers, with a median of 2%. So power users are rare. A few specific tasks show moderate usage. So 25% of those who use generative AI for reviewing or editing grammar did so sometimes or regularly, as did 17% of those using it to extract knowledge from scientific literature, and 16% using it to either write code or for administrative tasks. However, many of the tasks we asked about are almost never supported by generative AI, with 90% or more of respondents indicating that they never use Gen AI for them. Biomedical researchers expressed mixed opinions about the quality of generative AI as a research tool, typically rating their performance as fair to good. The most highly regarded use case for Gen AI, which was reviewing and editing grammar, is also the one that users report using most frequently. 28% of those who use Gen AI in this way rated it as producing very good quality results, with another 46% rating them as good. In contrast, majorities who had used Gen AI for automated manuscript writing, drafting grant proposals, hypothesis generation, and clinical note-taking judged the results poor or fair. For most tasks, there is no apparent consensus, as respondents were split on the quality of results. There are increasing reports from the private sector suggesting that the hype around Gen AI has worn off as the limits of the technology become apparent. A similar pattern could be manifesting among biomedical researchers who have tried generative AI. Pluralities of researchers rated generative AI's performance fair to very poor at tasks related to search and discovery, data cleaning, and analysis, for example. Finally, we asked researchers about the support they needed to use Gen AI in their research. Note the broad interest and support, and that researchers were more likely to value guidance from publishers and funders than their home institutions. A type of support that researchers identified as highly valuable was discipline-specific guidance about best practices for using Gen AI in research. 53% of biomedical researchers describe such help as highly valuable, and 80% as at least moderately helpful. Now I'll briefly touch on some possible implications of our findings. It seems as though there is a window here to take a breath and seek solutions to some of the challenges researchers reported. How long that window will last is hard to know. There's a plausible near-term future where Gen AI adoption rates accelerate despite these challenges. There are certainly lots of incentive structures that make it easy to see how pressure to adopt Gen AI could grow rapidly. Our survey suggests another plausible near-term future in which researchers' experimentation with Gen AI fails to persuade them of the value of the tool. If you are an AI skeptic, the good news here is that despite the perception that AI is a runaway train, adoption by biomedical researchers is occurring at a relatively measured pace. If you're someone who would like to see greater adoption of Gen AI in biomedical research, the clear places to put your energy are improving the accuracy and reliability of Gen AI outputs and identifying best practices to help researchers on the fence see how to get value from Gen AI. Thanks so much for listening, and feel free to contact me if you have any questions.